Support for this show is brought to you by novel Till the Bitter Endemic. What if there was a happy ending to a pandemic? Perhaps an unexpected love story. After Daisy gets thrust into mandatory quarantine for an infection she can't explain, it's up to her to unravel the truth as to what's behind it and what she can ultimately do to escape it. But she can't do this alone, and that's where she finds not only herself, but a very special person that opens their heart for the betterment of their survival. Find out how in Till the Bitter Endemic. Available now on Amazon in all major formats.
Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art in, well, the arts again, with our ever-evolving open discussion segment, Is It Art? Focusing today on how we categorize and classify art, culturally speaking, that is, such as how we define something as something like highbrow art versus lowbrow art, and how we sometimes try to find the different categories that fit more in the middle, and then how sometimes these things can change, especially through time. So there's no theses today, no gems, just unadulterated discussion. To hash things out, I am joined by our favorite highbrow art, and that is Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham, the Buck. T. Buck, welcome back to the show, Mr. Buck.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here.
So let's give the people a little background. So part of the reason we came up with this show, me and Buck, is we watched a certain film over the break, and that film is Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. And we have a lot to say about Megalopolis.
We do. Mm-hmm. Novo, can you just to start this off? Do you remember what I first texted you after I watched it?
I do not. Remind me.
Do you want me to read?
Yeah, read it to me.
It's the Musings of a Madman.
It's the Musings of a Madman. That's right. You know what's funny is when I was writing the show notes for this show, I was like, how are we going to title this? And I think I'm going to put in parentheses the Musings of a Madman. And I don't know if you realize this, but you did something very special, Buck. Before we go on break, I want to tell you something that you did. Our very first Is It Art show ever. And that was one that you helped to invent as well, and you helped to pitch the show topics, the segments. That conversation was our very first idea for this segment was, is Marvel movie cinema? So I realized that when we started this segment, we were on one end of the spectrum, and then after I saw Megalopolis, I realized that's the other end of the spectrum. And on one hand, they're spiritual successors because when you look at that end, you're like, are Marvel films true cinema? But then when I look at an art house film like this that is pushed so far in the other direction, I was like, is this still cinema?
Yeah, yes. Because here's the thing, there were so many things that were really awesome ideas. I loved, absolutely. But then there were things where I'm like, why? And I don't know. And it was almost like they were done just to do them. And before I'm not trying to sound elitist. I'm not a film auteur. I'm not a filmmaker, and I know there's a lot of work and a lot of time.
We study this stuff a lot, though, in our defense.
Yeah.
We are a bit of connoisseurs, a eensy-weensy bit. But there's a lot to learn. So
there is. I just, there's some things when you look at and you watch a film and you're just kind of puzzled, and when you're done watching it, you're like, I don't understand or what happened, but that's also kind of the brilliant part of it. We're still talking about it. So there's a lot of juicy middle to discuss. But guys, before we do, we're going to take a little break. Stay with us.
The best way to say thank you and to support us is by donating to the cause. In doing so, you'll be able to help us help fellow artists, creatives, and colleagues, promoting their work, the community as a whole, and why we got into this line of work to begin with, to not only make art, but also shine a light on our peers and the gems of the world. For all the hidden ones and the not so hidden that make life worth living, because if we can make things even a little bit better, it'll all be worth it. But we can't do this without you. So please, donate today. And remember, even a little goes a long way to build new bridges, new worlds, and new opportunities. Link and details on how can be found in the show notes below. Because together, we can do anything.
And we are back to do the thing and talk about Megalopolis. Megalopolis. I did it again.
Let's do it.
Megalopolis.
No, we'll call it Mega Psychopolis. It sounds like
oh god, this
no. It sounds like a transformer.
So okay. Here's the thing: is before we actually talk about the pros and cons of this film and how it kind of fits into how we categorize and classify art, particularly film, I want to start the conversation there, Buck. So for the good people, for me, okay, I'm the little kid in the classroom. You're the teacher. You're the professor. How do we define highbrow art versus lowbrow art, and kind of everything in the middle?
I think like highbrow. It's more when you get to that highbrow art, it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging sometimes to decipher. It's challenging sometimes to watch. It makes you think.
Yeah.
Brings new ideas to the screen, originality. And then I would say lowbrow art is
like
fart
Neil
jokes.
Breen and sophomore.
No, okay. I have a theory on Neil Breen.
Tommy Wiseau.
Tommy Wiseau.
That's an elaborate joke that like he's actually a serious filmmaker. But
I'm on board with the
theory with the tinfoil hat
because he's not a dumb guy. Yeah,
he's not a dumb guy. You know what? And he's not a dumb guy. And in a minute, that I will probably make a comparison to even Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh my God.
Godfather, yes. Dracula.
By the way, I love
Dracula. Francis Ford Coppola filmmaking days.
Yeah.
Here in a minute, but so yeah, you're on the T-Buck Tangent Corner. You're on the this is an elaborate ruse.
Yeah. I think if it is, he's my hero of all time. I'm not kidding. He's done it. That is the greatest bit of all time. And I will say, if he's not, I'm not going to hate on him. Just like sneak peek, folks, I'm not going to hate on Francis Ford Coppola on this. Although I kind of sounded like I did, he's still going out there and doing it. He's still putting all of his money into it. Neil Breen is doing the same thing.
He's still following his dream. He's still making the art he wants to make.
Yeah.
When I think of highbrow art or lowbrow art or all the gray in the middle, I think of culture, because culture shapes the artistic tiers, levels, classes, if you will. So we have cultural hierarchies and hegemonies, and that creates that's the subjectivity part, right? There's subjectivity in how we look at all of art, but then there's also the objectivity to it, and that's where we talk about things like gatekeepers. How can we monetize these things, and how can we invest in these things to vis-a-vis create monetization opportunities? And then there, of course, is always the binary opposition, how art can be simple sometimes versus complex, to your point of highbrow art usually being a little more complex, a little more thought-provoking, a little more progressive. Lowbrow art is, a little more sophomoric, a little less, a little more half, So there is a level of work ethic with that cultural sensitivity and the subjectivity, right? It's like, how much did they go above and beyond to put themselves to work hard with the art, and especially with film? There is so many layers to creating a film. There's the pre-production, the production, post-production, and then that's just one tier of the three main tiers, right? And then there's distribution, and then there's, of course, exhibition. So there's a lot of things that create the classes that is, art appreciation and how we look at them in terms of cultural hierarchies, right? And that, of course, brings us to Megalopolis, because where should we begin, Buck?
I don't know.
Megalopolis was so much. I will start the conversation with this statement. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I don't think it was as bad as I thought it was going to be. When I first, like, people were like posting photos of like, what the hell did I just watch? Or saying this is the most ridiculous garbage thing they've ever seen. I don't think it was that way. I get what he was trying to do and he was trying to say, and I think the part that I have I have a theory on
Okay,
why
what
it
is
is
your
the way it
theory?
is. Well, he's been trying to make this film for 40 years.
Right, it was a passion project.
It's a passion project.
So there is an element of highbrow
Yeah.
artistic value to this, because it took him decades
Yeah.
to create this film that he's had in his head forever, and he had to get all the stars aligned perfectly to get his vision fully realized. But then, so there is incredible work ethic, there's incredible vision, right, with the film. But
Yeah.
was it executed well?
Well,
That's where we may look at the highbrow like we start to come kind of down a little bit in those tiers.
so I think because he cooked on it so long, and that was the problem. He was trying to fit too many themes into this film. There's over encompassing themes. Obviously the big one is America. The downfall of the United States.
And it's like personified as like New Rome, I
New
think, in the
Rome,
film.
but
Right.
let me talk about that for a second. So the film takes place in a alternate universe where New York is basically New Rome. That they're still in the Roman Empire, which I don't fully understand how this all works, because I don't think we ever saw like an emperor, or we never talked about that. And then halfway through the film, I feel like they just kind of gave up on it, because there were like American flags in the background, and instead of, like, for a while they had like New Rome Police Department, and then you just started seeing FDNY. It almost was like they were just like, it.
I, on the other hand, is oral as hell. Yeah. The to your point of like, you felt as we were watching the film, it did feel like they were, especially the actors, were not necessarily giving up. I think maybe sometimes I felt that way, but like, I think not caring anymore. They're
Yeah.
like, we're not going to take this serious with this kind of dialogue. The dialogue being kind of so trite and things like that. Like Aubrey, I feel like the shining example of this was Aubrey Plaza,
Yeah.
because she, at first I felt like she was really trying to take the role seriously. Like, this is Francis Ford Coppola. This is a legend in Hollywood. I get to
Yeah.
be in a Francis Ford Coppola film. This is a big deal. And then I feel like you could feel like you were the fly on the wall, and her being like, wait, this is it though, but this is the grand vision. I think you make a good point too with the too many cooks in the kitchen in his mind. Like,
In his
he
mind.
was marinating on it for too long, because
Yeah.
it felt, to me, it felt more like a play
It did have
than a
that.
realized theatrical cinematic film.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It did have that kind of, almost, he was trying to make it Shakespearean. I want to go back and say, like, to the actors, I do think like Adam Driver definitely put his heart and soul
Oh my
into it.
God, they tried so hard.
He tried so hard, but what this really is this is not a film. This film is about Francis Ford Coppola. The main character is Francis Ford Coppola. He's basically trying to say, I am this artistic genius that I've been trying to make this beautiful thing in cinema. Which he tried to do, where artists controlled how distribution rights, controlled how movies were made. It failed spectacularly.
Yes, it failed spectacularly.
And so,
It's like $140 million, and it made, I think, a tenth of that. It made like 14 million, 13 million, something like that.
But it's basically it's a romanticized kind of view of how he did try to do things, and I give him a ton of respect for that. And things just didn't work out in his way, and I think there was a lot of cathartic lashings in this from that, about just society as a whole, art, America, Not that some of the stuff he said isn't, I agree with. It's just the execution, like we brought up, is a little off.
We didn't quite land the plane.
No.
Is maybe a nice way to put it. There was so many things. So I have, I feel like Mike from Red Letter Media. I made notes, and I have
This
some
is
notes.
great.
I have some notes I want to read. Musically, you know, like in our long form topical shows, we usually break down a film with like story and characters and music and editing and special effects. And so I'm going to try to make it sound professional with this. So let's talk about music for a little bit. One of the notes I put was the softcore porn music was an interesting choice for the film. And then let's jump to special effects.
Oh, yeah.
Then I said they didn't even try to make the green screen scenes seamless. Like it was clearly
bad.
Like it was. They didn't even try to make it seamless in post. At the end of it all, it's kind of a subtle comedy, even though it's trying to be so serious.
And that's what. Yes, it totally is. And I think that's how it's going to endure.
We may want to put a pin on that because I feel like that's going to be a whole segment is the future. Because this is the thing about art, and we've talked about this a million times in our other shows, is time tends to heal all artistic wounds. Because here's where I'll be a little defensive about it, and then I'll read some more of my funny notes.
Okay.
It is completely different, you know?
Yeah.
And it is completely different. It is very original, very progressive. A lot of ideas, to Buck's point. The problem is with all of that is that we have been cooking ourselves as the audience now, talking as the audience now. We have been cooking in a vat of Marvel and DC films for so long, decades, or over a decade now.
No, decades. We're coming up on 20 years.
Is it decades now? Oh, you're making me feel old.
Okay, 2008 was Iron Man.
Oh god. Well, we're not quite 20 years yet. So
15, but
16,
we had the Dark Knight trilogy.
I guess 17. Oh, that is true. Oh, touche.
Yeah.
But that was like
that's DC
and this is Christopher Nolan. It's completely different kind of filmmaker.
Don't hate on us because I do like those movies, folks.
I love The Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, yeah,
you know, like
perfect.
hands down.
Okay.
But before I digress too much, the point is that we, the audience, have changed so much, so dramatically, so drastically in those. Let's be nice and say, let's say 2008. So approximately 17 years that. Part of the reason this failed miserably is just because of that. We have changed? Because I thought about it before we go into the future. Let's go way into the past. What's if this was made 50 years ago with different actors? What's if it was like Charlton Heston? You know, I actually feel like it could have landed a whole lot better.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point because maybe, there was definitely a lot more of that going on. Yeah, I didn't really maybe connect the dots on that. I don't know if that would. Okay, so if it's still made the same way and edited the same way, I still think it's a little absurd. And I don't know if it would ever be technically considered a classic.
I agree.
I think this could have used some outside opinions and it could have been a lot better.
Oh, I have a note that piggybacks off of that perfectly.
Okay.
I wrote, it's either too smart or too stupid for its own good. It
Oh,
often gets buried in its own ambitions.
I think that is a perfect synopsis of the entire movie.
Well, thank you. I tried hard as I was on my Peloton watching this film on my phone.
Oh, you were on the Peloton.
I was on my Peloton half the time because I was like, I gotta do something while I watch this or I'm gonna fall asleep. Now we're about halfway through the show, so let's talk about the halfway point in the film too. Let's mirror these two worlds. So I have a note that says, after the halfway point of the film turns into this weird bridging point where it's mostly vignettes of small ideas.
Yes. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. That's the other thing I had with that. It's like I was saying earlier, there are so many ideas and so many types of themes he was trying to get across. It was just a jumbled mess. Like if he would have cut out some of those and focused on, some base core ones, I think this would have been a totally, brilliant film.
Well, I still had a hard, to your point of, we'll talk about the messy plotting and narrative here in a minute, but I think to your point of there was good ideas and if executed well, it could have been brilliant.
Yeah.
The one thing that still kind of took me out of the film, and I was curious to hear your thoughts on it, is the fantasy elements.
Yes.
Because throughout the film, and I made a note about this, I wrote, one, the rules of the fantasy aren't explained, right?
No.
Usually with a fantasy or like horror does this well. The rules, there's always like these like in-universe rules to a film, right? Like The
Mhm.
Matrix is another good example of that. Like, this is how these things work, right? And once we learn that as the audience, we buy into that, and then we suspend disbelief and be like, okay, well, this is how it is in this universe.
Yeah.
That was never explained once in Megalopolis. And then and then as soon as I tried to catch up on those rules, I was like, okay, I think I'm kind of getting the rules. He kind of controls time, but he also has this machine, or does the machine control time? But then they broke their own rules, and oftentimes it would be inconsistent. And I feel like that was one of the major failings to me, besides all of the more obvious ones, like dialogue like this. Well, look at this boner.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, or, yeah. And, oh, man. Yeah. Some of the writing on here, it's very similar to, and they're best friends, George Lucas, when he did The Phantom Menace. And one of the big criticisms of that when he wrote that was that, there were not a lot of people that were telling him no.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
maybe you should do it this way. I'm not saying that Francis Ford Coppola, I know this was his passion project, and he can get a pass on this with, it's my passion project. I want it to be exactly how I view it. But if you wanted it to be something more than that, these are team projects. Nothing gets done just with one person conducting the whole orchestra, like, and playing all the instruments at the same time.
In fact, by the end of the film, there was so many ideas, so much going on. I asked myself what a lot of people ask at the end of a art house film like this. I was like, what is this film trying to say? And I only came to one conclusion. I have no idea.
I think I know what it was trying to say.
Oh, enlighten us.
I think what the theme of the film was that society will downfall unless it lets the dreamers dream and embrace ideals that are purposely for improving society. And this whole thing was
Deep.
that it's basically he wants a utopian society. He thinks that he has the right ideas for it, but it won't happen because there's so much corruption. And I mean, it's a little ham-fisted how it was displayed on the film. But in the end, I think what he was trying to say is that eventually we will get there. It's going to take a while.
I will say this, and this is how I will relate him to Neil Breen. I'll bring it back, round circle. So at least with their filmmaking and their vision for the stories they want to told, at least they're competent. When you shed the dialogue and some of the acting choices and the music and the special effects, what are you left with? Not a lot for one, but what are you left with? Well, you're still left with direction and cinematography. And I have to say, it was a very good looking film. And I think people just look at any either fan made or student film to see that direction is more than just pointing a camera at an actor and them reading lines. There's blocking, there's tonal ideas and how we're using lighting, and that's where the cinematography comes in, because they're kind of two sides of the same coin sometimes. But at least it was competent, right?
Yeah.
Like there was the vision was at least fully realized, even though it didn't quite land. And we had good direction, we had good cinematography. It was well edited. There was a lot of positive merit to this film, much like a Neil Breen film, where like at least it's it's more than just a student film or a fan film.
It's not a midnight movie.
It's not a midnight movie. There is a
like he
little
says
bit of
that.
competence here. I mean, obviously Francis Ford Coppola has miles more competence than most filmmakers, but competence goes a long way in filmmaking.
This movie is Francis Ford Coppola's Double Down.
Or do you think it is like, I have nothing to lose? Like, I'm an old man. I probably got one more film in me. I should do this film that's been in my mind forever.
No, I think that's
Because
exactly
I mean,
where
he
he's
put up
at.
he put up almost all of his own money. This is so rare in Hollywood for an
Yeah.
actual filmmaker to finance his own almost all of the movie. I think I can only think of one other person that does this, and that's M. Night. But
Yeah.
M. Night usually is usually in the lane of the thriller or the horror film or something that sells well in this market. This how would you even classify this film? It's like a fantasy. It's like a
Fantasy drama.
fable.
I think he's
Fantastical fable drama with
yeah, he calls it a
elements of
fable.
science fiction.
I think it's a fable. I think it's a fantasy.
But going back to your point, it's a lot of things.
And I will question a little bit of the editing. Some of the editing, I was like, we would jump to certain things. I'd be like, what is going on?
Well, I think to your point, I think you said that when people aren't saying no to you, when
Yeah.
usually great art is a team effort.
Yeah. It's just like there was too many. We're jumping around to too many different themes.
I
All
think
at
we see
once.
this in musicians a lot.
Yeah.
When the lead singer is like, I don't need my band, I'm going to go solo, and then his solo work is really quite bad, and then
Yeah.
he goes back to the band. I feel like it's like that, but with Francis Ford Coppola.
I do think he did push the limits, and he did he did present some really good ideas
to, in a way.
Yeah, and I think it was I respect it. Like you were saying, he fronted his own money for this. He sold most of his wine business for this. Good for him. So no, seriously, like I love that he put it on the line.
And that brings us to the future. Buck was already kind of talking about this. And so before I give you my 2 cents, I want you just to summarize your 2 cents. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, how do you feel like the audience will come to change or reappreciate or re-examine Megalopolis?
I think it will be held in higher regard than it is now. But I think it's going to be very similar to it's going to be more on the lines of like beloved as a cult classic like The Room or Fateful Findings, kind of something like that. I do think it. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. Why is the tiny bow and arrow? I did laugh out loud in one part of the
slapstick comedic. There's a set of kind of interesting comedic choices here.
Yes, there was a part, and I told you this when I watched it. I go, there is a part in this film that I laughed out loud and could not stop laughing, and it was John Voight shooting this tiny little bow and arrow. He kills, sorry, spoilers, but he kills Aubrey Plaza, and then he shoots Shia LaBeouf in the ass with it while he's running out the door. And I don't know why, but it was just the comical size of the bow and arrow.
It was the size of an actual, like,
it looked like a cherub.
Like a
little
Toys R Us or a like actually made for children sized bow and arrow, like for a toddler.
Yeah, maybe there's some symbolic meaning behind it, and it was just flew over my head.
There was no one saying no to him. I think it's fascinating to think about how these things will change in years to come, because I put an example on our notes. The biggest one that I think really shocked all of us, including myself, was Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut. When that came out, it was critically panned. It was a commercial failure. Like, people really hated it. Like,
yeah.
I was shocked at, how bad it was received. And now it's considered one of his best films. People like really, really, really love it. I was shocked at the extent of the 180, Buck. But I agree with you on Megalopolis. Did it again. Do we think that in 10 to 20 years, Megalopolis, there we go, is going to be heralded as something that people love? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't even think it's going to be like The Room. I don't think it's going to be so bad it's good kind of thing.
You just think it's going to be forgotten, basically?
No, because it's Francis Ford Coppola, and if it really is his last film, that's going to be the stamp. Like, this is the end of the career right here, stamped. This is so hard but fun. I like when we do this. It's going to be, I think it will be, I will give it this. I think it'll be in a little bit of a higher regard. I don't think it will be as critically panned as it is now. I think people will really give it a chance and really.
It'll be studied.
It will be a little bit. I just think there'll be more positive beams of light on it instead of all of this negativity.
That's fair.
But will it turn into something like An Eyes Wide Shut? No. Will it turn into so bad it's good like The Room? No.
Nah.
It'll be somewhere in that murky middle that is so hard to really describe, going back truly round circle to the whole frame of the piece is how we classify and categorize art. I mean, it can be very hard when it's not binary because we're so used to things being just like amazing, like, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and just very poor, like, oh my God, this is not great at all. And we're in this weird time because we're getting a lot of that middle stuff now. And because the audience is so conditioned to be, where's the Transformers and where are the super, because we are the audience is not ready for that pendulum swing back to art and art house. I think we're getting there though, with A24 and stuff like that, because I recently saw Nosferatu and I kind of felt the same way. And I was like, this is really well directed and the cinematography is just on another level. But for some reason, it's just my expectations are not meeting the reality of the film. I didn't like it as much as I really, really liked it. I just didn't love it. And I think we're seeing a lot of these pieces that are really trying to have a voice and really trying to be artistic are trying to, it's almost like art house films are trying to find themselves as a genre again.
Yeah. And I think like you said, it's the pendulum swings back and forth.
Oh, we're all sick of the Marvel and DC stuff. So we're so ready for this stuff, but not
people
quite
like
yet.
And I get it. It's fun. And sometimes,
no, I mean, yeah, we like the popcorn, like I think a shining example of those kind of movies that still land consistently is like Mission Impossible kind of films, like Bond.
Yeah,
like the spy thriller caper.
I'm going to throw this out there too, because some people really love the Fast and the Furious franchise.
I have not seen a Fast and the Furious film since I want to say the second one,
but they became kind of like another Mission Impossible, James Bond.
Oh yeah, like
they evolved.
Like The Rock is like throwing cars into other cars.
Yeah, but like people love it, and it's so funny because I can't remember like the 7th or 9th one, and I went back and watched the first one. I'm like, it's amazing how we got here. But I think to your point, getting back on track,
pull it back.
I do really love that we're giving some of these films, and A24 is around, and we're giving artists the chance to make these.
We're giving them their own voice again. It doesn't have to be the suits in the room making every single decision. Just let the musician, let the artist, let the filmmaker make the thing, and then let it drop and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's kind of Megalopolis in a nutshell.
It really is.
But guys, what do you think? We like to put the ball in your court with these segments. Did you like Megalopolis? If you did, you know what? Did you love Megalopolis? Because I want to meet you.
I want to meet you.
I want to interview you. I want to talk shop. Come on the show. You're welcome. You're invited.
We'll devote an hour to you.
Oh my God, yes. So yeah, what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Was it somewhere in the middle? Let us know. Holler. But until then, guys, thank you for listening. As always, I want to thank you. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham, for joining us as usual. And if you like that, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You can check out our work at NovaDayProductions.com. And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child, you can always reach out to us at NovaDayProductions@gmail.com. So until next time, you know what to do. We'll see you in the next one. But until then, be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created by Novo Day and Theodore T. Buckingham. Written, directed, produced, and edited by Novo Day and the NDP Collective. Starring Philip Church of philipchurch.com, that's Philip with one L. Alexandra Parsons of alexandraparsons.com, ALEXANDRA-PARSONS.com. With special contributions by Theodore T. Buckingham. Music by A Company, Instagram handle A_CO_music_. Logo design by Tom Justice of thejusticecompany.com, JESTUS. Thank you again for listening. All rights reserved. Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is our go-to tool for remote podcast recordings. What's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to Zencastr.com, Zencastr.com, and use promo code Art of the Beholder to get 30% off your first 3 months with a pro account. This show is supported by philipchurch.com. Need a professional voice for your project? Whether it's a commercial, podcast, audiobook, or other, I deliver high-quality voiceover and narration services that match your vision. And with fast turnarounds, crisp audio, and a range of tones and styles to suit your needs, isn't it time to bring your story or brand to life? So let's get going. Visit philipchurch.com, that's Philip with one L, to find demos, samples, and contact information. And with this voice, let's make that next project unforgettable. Are you ready to elevate your style and make a lasting impression in fashion? Ready for change? To find the best you? Whether it's creating stunning designs or crafting the perfect wardrobe, AP Design is here to transform your vision into reality. From everything from sustainable goods to personal consulting, Alexandra Parsons of AP Design aims to bring innovation and elegance to your every project. So let her help you stand out with ideas that are bold, timeless, and uniquely yours. To get started, you can go straight to her shop with the link below in the show notes, or you can book a consultation at alexandra-parsons.com and let your new life start today. That's Alexandra, ALEXANDRA-Parsons, PARSONS.com. Because great design isn't just seen, it's felt.